Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of this two-parter video where I am ranking the Wheel of Time series from worst to best, and so far I have done from 14 to 8, and today in this video I'm going to do from 7 to 1, so I'm going to do my top half of the table, so to speak. I'm going to do my top 7 books, my favourite Wheel of Time books in the series. And so I have so far gotten up to the last book was The Eye of the World, and that was at number 8. So I'm going to go straight to number 7 now in my list, which is Towers of Midnight. So Towers of Midnight was book number 13, the penultimate book of the series, the second book which Brandon Sanderson wrote to work his way towards the end of this amazing epic fantasy series. And I thought he did a pretty good job with this book. It was a really, quite in places, absolutely gripping read. And I suppose what's fresh in my memory from this book, having read it quite recently, are the final scenes in about the last kind of 60, 70 pages of this book, which are all happening in this Tower of Genji. This really made this book for me go from good to really good, maybe excellent, and it was just a really gripping final few chapters to a very good book. So it comes in at number 7 of 14, so it's about, I suppose, mid-table. That means to me, maybe I have to say, it's not perfect. I did find there were parts of the book I didn't quite like as much, maybe, but it still comes in reasonably high in the pecking order, I guess. So that's Towers of Midnight. At number 6 is A Memory of Light, which is the final instalment of the whole series, and I have to sort of say, kind of congratulate, I think, Brandon Sanderson, as a lot of people do. I think a majority of people think he did a good job finishing the series, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think he had a tough job to do with such a, so much scope in this series, so many characters. Tying off such a big series would just be such a huge task just for the same writer of that series to do. You know how much George R.R. Martin is struggling at the moment, but to do it when somebody else has authored most of the previous books, I think would be really difficult. I mean, I'm not really a writer myself, but I imagine that must be very difficult to do. So A Memory of Light is in at number 6, quite high up in my list. I think it does justice to the series. I really enjoyed now this is a minor spoiler, can I just say before I say it, I really enjoyed the 4 captains coming under the compulsion, and how we find out that they are under compulsion, and as our characters find out, the sort of favourite characters find out about this. I thought that was really well done and really well written, and it kind of suddenly surprises, like, oh no, so-and-so is a dark friend, or so-and-so is kind of doing something strange. Why are they doing that? And I thought all of that was really good. And I enjoyed most of the 200-odd page last battle chapter. Really good, with some really epic payoffs and confrontations. I can think of a few. Obviously, some of these would be really major spoilers, so I'll refrain perhaps from naming the really major spoilers. But it was a great climax to the series, I thought. There were 1 or 2 issues I have, and the reason it's not higher than number 6 on the list is, I guess, that I just had some minor criticisms of, I think, some aspects towards the very end of the book. It felt like, even though it's 1,000 pages, this book, it's a enormous book, it just felt a bit rushed towards the end. I thought that it felt like maybe I don't know if Brandon felt pressure, or if you know, to finish the series and tie off as much as possible, knowing how much had already been written in that book. But it just felt towards the end like some things were just a little bit more rushed. Even though there was a 200-page last battle, so it does feel a bit sort of strange and maybe contradictory for me to say that. But there were some parts as well where it felt like the scenes were being switched between in the characters very, very quickly, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but it seemed, for me, it affected the flow of the story in this as well sometimes. But those minor criticisms aside, this was still a great book, and a suitable finale, I thought, on the whole, to a really great series. Number 5. What's number 5 on my list? Well, it's the last of the Jordan books, if you can call them that. It's The Knife of Dreams. What a great book this was, almost as a swan song for Robert Jordan, I thought. He, after, you know, I want to say perhaps the sort of one of the very, very few lower points of the series, maybe Crossroads of Twilight, and for me also the one before it, perhaps Winter's Heart as well, which was bottom of my list. Those two books, it felt for me like that he sort of hit a bit of a real slowdown in the story. Some of that was I think to develop aspects of it before reaching the, you know, tying off a lot of the things that he does in Knife of Dreams. But yeah, getting back to Knife of Dreams, really, really good book. So many highlights in this, so many highlights in the prologue. The start of the book is like, you know, you can tell Robert Jordan almost meant business with the way he starts this book off, with that really good sword fight, I think, between Galad and Eamon Valda, which I thought was really good. And there are lots of other highlights in this book as well. I think there's some great scenes with Matt and Tom Merrilin. There's a really good, perhaps possibly one of my favourite confrontations with the Forsaken, with involving Rand in this book, which I thought was just epic and brilliantly done. And yes, that's the reason why Knife of Dreams is number 5. Very, very few criticisms. In fact, my top 5, there's hardly anything between my top 5 books here. They are all so good. 5 of the best fantasy books I've ever read. So my top 5, I really struggle to find any criticisms with these whatsoever. And so moving on to number 4 is The Shadow Rising, the epic, the lengthier novel of the series, where Robert Jordan really branches out his story and really branches out the characters and their, you know, the threads of their almost kind of subplots going on in each stage of this book. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I think it has one of my favourite moments of the whole series for sure, which involves Nynaeve and Moghedien, I think is how you say her name, the Black Azure. And it's generally just very well structured, I think, this book, and sort of serves to nicely set up the later books in the series as well. It just goes so much further than The Dragon Reborn in really developing the story, and for that reason The Shadow Rising is number 4 in my list. What's number 3 then? It is, perhaps this is the most, I don't know, maybe there is still another shocking choice in this list, or surprise, even not shocking, but surprise choice, which I'll come on to very, very shortly. But number 3 is A Crown of Swords. Now, I get the feeling that some people don't like this book from reading, you know, watching YouTube videos and reading online forums and, you know, comments about Wheel of Time series. I get the feeling this one isn't necessarily a very popular book, so perhaps this is my most controversial pick, I'm not sure. But this book, I think I've read just in a flash. I mean, I generally take a while to get through I have to admit it takes me a bit of time to get through books, particularly ones that are more than just 200 or 300 pages, because I really like to digest what I'm reading. I'm not great at speed reading, and I suppose I'm just a little bit of a slow reader, and I tend to find that with everything else going on, sometimes I just don't read as much. But this book had me hooked, and I just read it almost, I think, straight away through in just a few sittings. It was excellent stuff, and I think it was just that my preference perhaps for Wheel of Time books are the ones that are more faster paced, where there's a lot going on, there's a lot of action, and this is certainly one of those types of books, and I really enjoyed a lot of parts of this. I think my favourite moments included Mat and the Golem, and Rand and Samael in Ilion, which I just absolutely loved. I loved all that bit. That was really good. So moving on to number 2 on my list is The Gathering Storm. Now, this was the first book that Sanderson was involved with or wrote, and yet it's my favourite of his 3, and it also is kind of a transitional book, isn't it? It's the one he took over, so I bet this is a bit of a surprise choice as well on my list, but this was just I really enjoyed this book so much. I loved, particularly because a lot of this is focused on Egwene's story, and her arc as a character, I think, and sort of there's just so many great moments involving Egwene and the other Aes Sedai characters surrounding her as the plot with the Black Azure unfolds, and the way this is written is so beautifully done with other Aes Sedai characters in the tower. I think it's just so beautifully done, and I think it's hard here. I really am going to end up giving away spoilers. I'm going to have a spoiler warning, I think, for this video, but Verin Sedai comes to mind as what she says. I just think it's just so well done. Her sort of speech, if you like, towards the end, and I love when certain members of the Black Azure are brought to account, and one or two really quite again beautifully written scenes, last scenes of some of these Black Azure who've been brought to or being brought to justice, and the Sheriam scene, I think it is, comes to mind. I just thought that was just amazing as well, and this book is terrific. I understand some people probably don't like the change from Jordan to Sanderson, perhaps, but and that it feels in places like that different style of writing is very noticeable. But as a story on its own, as a book, just treated as a fantasy book, this book is for me 5 stars. It's 5 stars. My top choice of this series, now we're on to the final one, number 1, the one and only. It's The Great Hunt. And far from me to say, perhaps this is a slightly sentimental pick. Perhaps that's why it has beaten The Gathering Storm, which I love possibly equally in a way. But The Great Hunt just has so many great moments and lots of good chases and lots of exciting moments and brilliant character interaction. I think a lot of the fantastic moments here are between Rand, Loial and Hurin, and there's some wonderful moments involving them, and I think it's the Illuminators Guild, and also other highlights of this book, the final scenes towards the end, I think are pretty spectacular as well, and it just has a real journey of a book. This is a real exciting fantasy journey, which is progressing the story. It's the first book where you suddenly realise, hang on, this series is going to be worth reading to the end. And it was this book that hooks me on to Wheel of Time, good and proper. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed these top 7. I will see you next time.